An interesting debate. An atheist professor of philosophy was lecturing to a class about the problem science has with God the Almighty. He asked one of the new Christian students to stand up, and he started to question him about his faith. "Young man, you are a Christian, right? Please stand up." "Yes, sir." "Is God good?" "Sure, he is." "Is God all-powerful?" "Yes." "Tell me, son, my brother died of cancer, even though he prayed to God to heal him. Most of us attempted to help, but God didn't. Now tell me, is this God of yours still good then?" The student was silent. "You can't answer, can you? Let's start again, young man. Is God good?" "Yes, sir, God is good." "Is Satan good?" "No, he's not, sir." "Where does Satan come from?" "He comes from God, sir." "That's right. Now tell me, son, is there evil in this world?" "Yes, sir." "Evil is everywhere, isn't it? And God did make everything, correct?" "Yes, sir." "So who created evil?" The student did not answer. "Is there sickness, young man?" "Immorality, hatred, ugliness, all these terrible things exist in the world, don't they?" "Yes, sir." "So who created them?" The student was silent again. "Science says we have 5 senses which we use to identify and observe the world around us. Now tell me, son, have you ever seen God?" "No, sir." "Tell me, at least you have heard God speak to you." "No, sir." "Have you ever felt this God of yours, or even tasted him, smelled him? Have you ever had any sensory perception of God that matter?" "No, sir, I'm afraid I haven't." "And you still believe in him?" "Yes, sir, I do." "Young man, according to empirical, testable, demonstrable protocol, science says your God does not exist. What do you have to say about that, young man?" "Nothing. I only have faith." "Yes, faith. That's exactly the problem science has." "Professor, is there such thing as heat?" "Yes, young man." "Is there such thing as cold, Professor?" "Yes, there is." "No, Professor, you are wrong. There isn't." And the class was quiet. "Professor, you can have lots of heat, even more heat, or superheat, mega heat, white heat, or little heat or no heat at all. But we don't have anything called cold. We can heat something to 458 degrees below zero, which is no heat. But we cannot go further than that. There is no such thing as cold, Professor. Cold is only a word we use to describe the absence of heat, sir. We cannot measure cold. Heat, on the other hand, is energy. Cold is not the opposite of heat, sir, just the absence of it." And the class was completely quiet and silent, and you could even hear a pen drop. "What about darkness, Professor? Is there such thing as darkness?" "Yes, there is. What is night if there isn't any darkness?" "You are wrong once again, sir. Darkness is the absence of something. You can have low light, normal light, bright light, or even flashlight. But if you have no light, sir, you have nothing. And that nothing is called darkness, isn't it? In reality, sir, darkness isn't. If it is, you would be able to make darkness even more darker, wouldn't you, sir?" "So what's your point, young man? What are you trying to say?" "Well, sir, my point is that your philosophical premise is flawed." "Flawed? Can you explain how?" "Well, Professor, you are working on a premise of duality, sir. You argue there is life and then there is death, a good God and a bad God. You are viewing the concept of God as something finite, sir, something we can measure. Sir, even science can't explain a thought because it uses electricity and magnetism, sir, but has never seen, much less fully understood, either one. To view death as the opposite of life, sir, is to be ignorant to the fact that death cannot exist as a substantive, sir. Death is not the opposite of life, sir, but the absence of it. Now tell me, Professor, do you teach your students that they evolved from the monkeys?" Well, if you are referring to natural evolution process, yes, of course I do. Have you ever observed evolution in your own eyes, sir? The professor smiled, knowing exactly where the conversation of this argument was going. And the student continued, since no one has ever observed the process of evolution at work, cannot even prove that this process is an ongoing endeavor. Are you not teaching your opinion, sir? Are you not a scientist but a preacher? Is there anyone for that matter in this class who has ever seen the professor's brain? And the class broke out in laughter. Is there anyone in this class who has ever heard or felt the brain of the professor or even smelt it? Well, no one appears to have done so. So according to your established rules of empirical, stable, demonstrable protocols, sir, science says that you do not have a brain, Professor. With all due respect, sir, how do we then trust your lectures? And the class was hysterical. I guess you have your point then, young man. Faith. Correct, sir. The link between man and God is faith. That is all that keeps things alive and moving. Faith, Professor. Faith.